Welcome to the It's Your Choice podcast, where we learn how to rewire our brains to live the life we desire. On with the show. Okay. Welcome to It's Your Choice podcast. Today on the show, we have Jim Bouchard. Thank you very much, Jim, for joining us today.
Oh, it's an honor. Yes, absolutely.
Great. So, Jim, you've said that the age of command and control is dead, and human-centric leadership is the future. But we do face some serious challenges with that. Before we get into those challenges, why do you believe this change is happening right now?
That's a really cool question because I don't know that the change is happening right now. I don't know if command and control leadership was ever the best type of leadership overall. I mean, all leadership is situational, right? There are times when we have to issue orders, and there's times when we want to follow orders. I'd argue, though, that we're only going to follow orders, and I learned this as a firefighter, actually. We're only going to follow orders when we respect and trust the person who's giving those orders, right? When they've earned our respect and our trust and our loyalty. So, the command and control strategy of leadership is something that we can employ at key times. But overall, when people are locked in that idea that, do as I say, not as I do, or, it's my way or the highway, the classic things that we think about with
Yes.
command and control, it's not effective. I mean, it never really has been. It doesn't bring out the best in people. You can, I suppose, accomplish up to a level of expectation, but you're never going to exceed that. So, yeah, but it's nice that now people, I think, are waking up to it more and prioritizing people. But again, these aren't new ideas. I mean, Lao Tzu said, what, 2,500 years ago? A leader is best when the people know he barely exists. When their work is done,
Mm.
they'll say, we did it ourselves. I mean, all of a sudden, it seems like a lot of academic leadership experts are discovering these things, but they're very, very old. There's just some of us that like to remind people of it from time to time, huh?
Right. And I think too, where there's some that we hear about some leaders that were not very nice, business ones,
Yeah.
and they became very successful. And so then people think, oh, I need to be like that person to
Mm.
be successful. And Steve Jobs was one of them, and they think, oh, I need to be that person. But then if we look at the opposite of Mother Teresa, she was very successful on a completely different type of thing. But I think also we need to be what is success? What is the end goal? But I also completely agree with what you say that people will do more and do their best for somebody who they know, like, and trust. Because if I think you've
Yeah.
got my back and you'll stand up for me, I'll go the distance for you to make sure that things get done or do what I need to do that is the best for you as well.
I should be taking notes because you just brought up two very interesting, complex examples, and I'm going to circle back to that. But
Okay.
I recently just wrote an article, why I'm not suing HBR for plagiarism. Harvard Business Review had just well, three people that wrote for Harvard Business Review completed this gigantic study, and it was pretty cool. I mean, again, it's nice that these people are recognizing this, but in their opening paragraph, they said they almost word for word something I've been saying for years. I'll just give it the way I say it because I don't remember exactly what they said.
Mhm.
But people perform at their best when and only when they know their leaders care, their work has meaning, and they have the chance to learn, grow, and develop. Well, I'm not going to sue HBR, obviously, because again, those it's not my ideas. These are old ideas. But also, it's cool to see the validation now that people are studying it scientifically and validating what most of us picked up on the street, right? What we've known all along. And remember that too, when these guys are doing these genius studies, and it's pretty cool, but what's the data set? I always ask this when I'm presenting. I said, where are they getting all this? I said, they're getting it from you.
Right.
You're the data set. When you perform effectively as a leader, they're studying that and stealing your ideas, which is cool. It's what we need to do. And when you're performing less than optimally, well, then you become the bad example. So you said Steve Jobs and Mother Teresa, right?
Hmm.
Very
Two
complex
very
people.
different people, but in their own were very
Yeah,
perceived, at least, as very successful.
perceived as different. Perceived as different, right? Because it's interesting. Sometimes the persona is a little bit different than the actual person, right? Steve Jobs was not known as a very personable human being, except for his inner circle. Elon Musk is another one who's described that way. It's very interesting. Sometimes the public will perceive a leader if the leader has a public profile, right? Will
Mm,
perceive the leader based on limited access. We don't know these people. Whenever
right.
someone asks me to judge somebody, I always try, it's kind of a cop out, I suppose, but I say I don't know that person. I never met that person. I can
Right.
talk about what I see them doing, right, and how I perceive that, but that's about as far as I can go.
Because we don't really know them. Like we know
Right.
our family and even sometimes with our friends. Like
Hmm.
there's been times where somebody's done something, broken the law, and you
Mm.
talk to their friends and people that know them, and they're like, "What? No, there's
Oh,
no
you
way
looked
that
at my
person would
resume,
have
did
done
you?
that." So, and that's people
Yeah.
that we actually are
Yeah.
aware of and have conversations with, let alone people
Hmm.
who we just hear about in the media and news and they do some
Yeah.
keynotes and things like we don't know them.
Well, people are, often surprised when they find out because early in every presentation, I share my resume. I said I'm a two-time dropout and a former drug addict. They look at me like, what? Of course, I have to bridge. What does that have to do with leadership? And we can talk about that if you want. But um, it's interesting. Yeah, people have this perception. So Jobs, he was also a very inspirational person, wasn't he? Especially within his
Absolutely.
organization. And on the other
Hmm.
hand, Mother Teresa, I read a couple of interesting biographies about her that have come out over the last 10 years or so. And she did some things that, I mean, I was shocked. I said, holy cow, this person's wretched. It was like, what's going on here? Um, so yeah, there's the persona and then there's the real person. Now, the other side of that is, are we going to, and this is tough these days, right? Are we going to destroy somebody because of their flaws? Or are we going to take that person and that leader as a whole and say, you know, on, when you account for everything, is this person generally doing something positive, or are they doing, great damage? And that's really what we have to sit down and assess. Those without sin throw the first stone, right? I mean, so
Well,
yeah,
and I
it's
think though,
complicated.
yeah, it's very complicated because I don't know anybody who has done things that they're not proud of. We'll just put it that way.
Mm,
And that degree varies. Like what is something bad? Well, you could do something and somebody thinks, yeah, that's a horrible thing to do. And somebody else
hmm.
is like, well, it's not that bad. You could have done
Could have
worse,
done worse.
right?
Yeah,
Like there's
yeah,
always there's that gray. It's not, and I've used it, and
yeah.
it's an extreme example of somebody, they're great to you, maybe they're your brother, sister, cousin, somebody, and they're so good to you, and they help you out all the time, but you end up meeting somebody at the grocery store who knows this person, and this person is rude and mean and beats up people and
Yeah.
maybe has a secret life as a drug dealer or just like crazy. And so is the person good or bad? Well, it depends on who you talk to
And when?
because that it's that perspective and experience. And
Hmm.
obviously there's extreme cases where people just are bad and they do bad things. But if I do something bad one, two, three times in my entire life,
Yeah.
with what we would consider reasonably bad, not really bad, like I stole as a kid or lying about things or, like
Hmm.
nothing too serious. Should I be judged on those things? I mean, everybody too, what's the circumstance around it? We
Yeah.
get pushed
Yeah.
to do things based on where we're at, that if we weren't in a position to perhaps steal because I'm starving and I haven't eaten, I normally wouldn't if I could pay for it. But I
Yeah.
can't. So we're in those. So it really is difficult, and I don't think any of it is like a black and white answer.
No, it's very complex, and science is just now starting to evolve to a point where we're barely scratching the surface of understanding some of these behaviors and what's behind them, and why people that may be genetically predisposed to a certain behavior type or environmentally conditioned for it. Some people will respond one way, some another, and you just hit it too. It depends not just on it depends on when you face these circumstances, right? Like you said,
Mhm.
if you're starving, you're more likely to steal. Um, we don't condone people that are extremely violent, except when we need them to go fight a war. Then they become very useful people, at least for that period of time, right? So
Right.
yeah, it's extremely complex. The idea is, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't buy into so much this idea of human beings being good or evil. I kind of err on the side of caution, and I say we well, this is pretty well documented now. Our two greatest drives are survival and self-interest, right? And
Hmm.
that can conflict. Your attempt to survive and your pursuit of your self-interest can conflict with mine, and that's when we continually have trouble. We have to
Right.
learn how to resolve that all the time. Not solve it. I don't believe we'll ever solve it, but to continually work on resolution. So that's a real difficult question. It's an exciting question, but I believe it takes an extreme discipline, a commitment to discipline in order to most of the time act in a positive direction, especially when we're talking about the effect that we have on other people. And of course, that's something that in leadership we should be looking at all the time. It's not just about me, right? By de facto, the
Right.
definition of a leader is someone with the ability to attract willing followers and the will to serve them. So we are, it's part of the job. We're responsible for what our actions do to other people. And
Hmm.
hopefully our actions are guiding people in the right direction. Um, Not always, and we don't always know, right? We
And
don't always know.
that's
In fact,
that's
it's
where's that
cool.
million billion dollar crystal ball to
Well,
know because
recently it was some, and again, this has been pretty well documented recently. The two of the greatest traits. Well, when people ask me, what are the two traits of leaders that, or two or three traits of leaders that are really the most important, I say, well, the best leaders that I've ever met, the most effective leaders, have these two traits in common. They don't think they are very good. Okay.
well that's
And
good so they don't have the ego of I'm so
yeah,
good I do everything right.
yeah. A healthy ego, but not a destructive ego,
Right.
right? And then the idea that they're always learning, growing, and developing, which in martial arts we call beginner's mind, that constant seeking. So psychologists and anthropologists lately have discovered that two of the most useful traits for an effective leader are vulnerability and uncertainty. So you see how that dovetails with what I just said?
Yeah.
So yeah, things that were classically looked at as weaknesses, right? No, no, not at all. I've met great leaders, so have you. In fact, once in a while in a session, somebody will stand up and tell me how great they are. We usually have another name for that person, starts with an A, ends with an E, right?
Hmm. I've met a few of those in my life.
Yeah, and usually after the event, if I'm sitting at the bar, somebody will come up to me who works with that great leader and say, not so much. We get to hear the
Right.
rest of the story. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, they have a very high opinion of themselves.
yeah, yeah.
But I think to a certain degree we need people like that, right? Like we need people because
We need people
they
who are
humble,
confident, right? We need
right.
people who are, and I mean confidence and surety of an outcome, but confident in that they're ready for the fight, right? They've trained, they've prepared, they're ready to face the challenge. But
Mm.
it's really a scary line. And again, one of the gifts of my life as a martial artist was we were constantly studying this line. Where does confidence end and arrogance begins, right?
Right.
And that's the thing. And we all fall over that line once in a while.
Of course.
Yeah,
We're human beings.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But
Well,
I
not
think
me. I
one,
mean, I'm perfect, but I mean everybody else
of course, you get right to the edge of that line, but you don't go over.
is. Yeah, right. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and I think one thing that you said is really important too, and it was something similar that I heard many years ago at a conference that I was at, is people and our brains more specifically, we need to really think of them like plants. They need to grow, they need
Mm,
water, they need things because if it's not growing, it's dying. It may not be
right.
quickly, it could be slow, but if we're not constantly learning things, doing new things, using our brain, then it atrophies and it's not
Hmm.
good. But I
Hmm.
also think there's so much in the world. There's so many different things. There's so much that goes on and so many new things that I don't understand people who aren't wanting to learn and do new things because there's so many things that I want to do that I'm just like, I don't have enough time in the day and I won't live long enough to do all the things that I'm interested in doing and learning about and trying. And I have to pick and choose because there's so many I'm like, "Oh, I'd love to do that, but I
Yeah.
don't know really when. And I don't watch TV. I don't watch movies. Like I don't have Netflix, like all of those things. I'm like, I don't have time for that. I'm learning and working and doing and
Yeah.
even though I say working, like I love what I do, so I never feel like I'm working. Even I spent the weekend at a friend's place, and over the weekend I was like, oh, I can't wait to get back and work on this stuff because I love what I'm doing.
You like worms. You're opening a whole bunch of cans of worms there. And it's fun because, first of all, it's interesting because I'm a movie junkie myself. I admit that freely,
Okay.
and I also read voraciously. But I've noticed that for a lot of people, our literature is shifted from the written word to the cinema. And now it can all be junk too. Sometimes people say, "Well, no, no, you should read only read." So, well, there's a lot of junk that's written too. You got to be careful about what you're consuming. But a lot of good philosophy and stuff has moved to the screen. At the same time, when you talked about this shift, and I'm older than dirt, so I've seen this, and I saw this when I was running my martial arts schools, that I did see kind of an interesting change with this idea. The only people that really disgust me are lazy people and complacent people. Almost anyone else I can work with, right? And a lot of times, I even 20 years ago, I was considered kind of old school, and some parents would call me out on it and say, because they'd all want their kid to go to the next test for rank, right? Well,
Right.
that person isn't ready yet. He's not ready yet. Don't worry about it. We'll get him ready, but it's not ready yet. Well, why not? Well, because he hasn't been practicing. I can tell. I mean, he hasn't been practicing. Well, he gets bored. I said, no. Like you said, there's no excuse to get bored. I said, I've done these things 7 million times and I'm still not bored. I'm not where I want to be. But we've allowed, I think, a couple of generations, in general, you can never
Hmm.
specify for the individual, but in general,
Of
we've
course.
allowed a couple of generations to become bored, or we've occupied them with things that are not really engaging on an intellectual level, right? You drop
Hmm.
somebody in front of the video game. It's exciting, it's stimulating, it activates the dopamine system, but is it
Yeah.
really helping us intellectually? And
I know.
most recent studies that I've seen say no. We're seeing the cliff now. We're seeing where it's falling off. And for the first time ever, K through 12 cognitive ability is dropping into the toilet, and they can trace it directly, almost to the day that the smartphone was introduced to children. You know,
Right.
so that's
Well, and I
pretty
think
scary stuff.
it is because if you think, and I mean, I do occasionally do it, that I will scroll YouTube shorts or some
The
reels.
vortex, right?
I do it,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
not too often, but I also know that there's a way, sort of a loose way of training the algorithm to give you the stuff that you want. And so
yeah,
when
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
following certain, I will like certain things. And there's the odd time I'll see something, I'll be like, do I want more of this in my feed? No,
Right.
just scroll past it. And so I understand how that works. And so there are times that there's things that I learn from some of
Yeah.
those shorts and clips and things like that. So there are ways to use it, but I also know if you're
Mhm.
watching a 1 minute clip and a 1 minute clip and a 1 minute clip, 1 minute, 1 minute,
Yeah.
how do you focus and concentrate on something when it's like something new every minute, every minute, every minute?
It's very difficult, and it's a danger because we can condition ourselves to that shorter attention span. And don't get me wrong, to me, there's nothing wrong with just mind candy once in a while either. It's
Of
nothing wrong
course.
with giving yourself a break. But on the other hand, yeah, you got to be very careful. Like I said, the joke around here, we always say, "Did you get sucked into the vortex?" Right? And you're right; these algorithms are extremely intelligent, and they're feeding us, they're giving us that dopamine shot, and it's almost you have to be conscious to break that chain. You know what I mean?
Yes, you
Otherwise,
really do.
and it's nothing. This is not to denigrate anybody because I'm as guilty of it as anybody. We're slaves to that algorithm, and we will get sucked in. So we have to get something to break that chain. So usually, even if you have to go to the bathroom, use that to say,
And
okay,
don't bring the phone with you.
don't bring the phone with you. Yeah, right. I know it. Isn't that
It's
terrible? Yeah,
I mean, it's like everything. There's
yeah.
pros and cons to everything, but
Hmm,
then there's
hmm.
always the unintended consequences. And
Yeah,
those are things that we don't know about until it's happened, right? Because we
yeah,
could try
yeah.
to think of all the possibilities. And I mean, we do, right? Like we go through and we're
Mhm.
like, okay, well, what if this, what if this, what if this?
Mhm.
And then something happens like, oh, never thought of that one. Didn't see that coming.
Yeah, and now, well, now you're falling squarely into another leadership conundrum, right? Because it looks like a lot of times these situations look unintended to us as the consumer, right? But there are very clear intentions from the producer. And nowhere is that worse than in politics. You know, we were just brushing a little bit on politics before we started. And
Mhm.
I'd argue that the major political parties, especially in North America, are the best and cleverest marketers on the planet. They know
Oh yeah.
exactly how to get to us. And one of the ways they do it, and I'm be on a little bit of a soapbox with this, but one of the things that concerns me the most right now is the hatred between people, right?
Oh, it's
Red
awful.
shirt, blue shirt, Canada, USA, whatever the case may be. And we have to sit back as individuals and as neighbors and as friends and say, wait, and family even that's divided over these things now, right?
Mhm.
And say, no, wait a minute. We're falling prey to very clever and very focused intentions from these folks.
Mhm.
You divide and conquer is an effective strategy. Okay, very
Absolutely.
effective
And it's
strategy. And
yes.
that's the one they're using most effectively. They'll,
Yep.
you know, they'll win my vote by getting me to hate you. If I can, right? If you and I are at
Mhm.
odds with each other, we'll split that, and it's a very emotionally attractive thing to us subconsciously. So, yeah, again, we really have to get a handle on being conscious about that, and social media just amplifies it. Be
Oh, it
conscious.
does.
I always get into these threads where I'll argue with people, kind of as an exercise, right? And say, look, let's talk about the issue. Let's not call names. You just called this other person, a horrible, disgusting name. Why? That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. We don't
Right.
have to agree in order to respect one another. In fact,
No, not at all.
no, in fact, I think the best idea, I get challenged on that sometimes because people will say, well, we should either compromise or we should reach a consensus. And I said, why? The whole of Western thought was built on somewhat of an adversarial condition, right? So you bring your idea, I bring my idea, and we debate it, maybe even argue. A little heat doesn't
Yeah.
hurt anything as long as it
Oh no,
doesn't
it's
boil over.
good.
The idea that's really going to be the best one isn't the one you brought or the one I brought. It's the other one that we're going to find when we cook this up. Or we
Exactly.
accept that at any given time, because we both live in allegedly democratic societies, right? That's designed on purpose so that the ideas will compete and that we'll try ideas at any given time. Some of them are going to work, some of them are going to fail. But right
Right.
now, we vilify anyone who puts forth an idea that fails, and we make heroes out of an idea that works, even if both sides have alternately proposed that same idea through time, And it's a very strange place that we're at right now, amplified by our ease of communication. And like you said,
Right.
there's great things too. I mean, look, you and I are connecting.
Yeah.
Would we have met without this technology? I don't know, maybe, but it's not as likely. Would we
Right.
share these ideas with as many people if it weren't for this technology? And do we have access to? Yes, because we have access to every bit of biography and history
Mhm.
and leadership philosophy and theory. It's all at our fingertips.
Right. And
But
good information and bad
yeah,
information.
but I was scrolling. Uh, what's that guy who sells the signs in China? Tony there. Did you ever see? Talk about
No,
mind candy. Oh God, it's horrible, but it's funny. But I spent like 10 minutes just laughing at this
well,
guy, and
I mean, and the,
yeah,
the mind needs a
he
break.
got me.
Like, I don't know if, pardon the interruption. If you're enjoying this episode and you're someone who values performance, clarity, and personal growth, then you're going to love my Mind Matters weekly newsletter. Every week, I send out a quick, powerful piece designed to help high achievers like you master your mindset, upgrade your habits, and lead with more clarity and fulfillment. It's not fluff, it's science backed, actionable, and easy to digest. Think of it as your weekly reset button to realign with the leader you're becoming. So if you want to go deeper than what we've covered here on the show, then head over to www.sallypeterson.com. That's me. and subscribe. Your next breakthrough just might be one email away. Needs
Now
a
back
You
to
break.
the
got
show.
me.
Like, I don't know if you watch any of Dr. Huberman from Huberman Labs, his
No,
podcast.
no.
He is, oh gosh, I don't, you know what, I don't want to say because if I get anything wrong,
Yeah.
I'll hear the wrath of people. But he's really smart, works at a great university, and he's got his podcast. And he was saying this: the studies and some of the scientific things that they've done is, on average, if we do 90 minutes of focused work, like one task, focused concentration work,
Mm.
then after that, for the next 10 to 30 minutes, depending individually and what you're working on, like your brain needs a break. And
Yeah.
either you can go for a walk, you get a bite to eat, get a drink of water. If you do, you
Oh,
scroll
yeah.
through your phone for
Mhm.
10 minutes. And then, then you can get ready to do another amount of very focused work. And so
Mhm.
there are the benefits of sometimes that bit of scrolling and, but again, being aware of what we're looking at. And if you want to watch some cute cat videos, great. I like sometimes listening to babies laugh. I've come across a few
Yeah.
videos of a baby laughing, and it's funny to hear them
Yeah.
laugh, and that's great. It's a break. I laugh. Laughing is good for the body.
Yeah.
And then, then getting back to work, and just to jump back a little bit on the politics. My best friends and I are not politically aligned,
Hmm.
and we talk about politics often. Um, and just even earlier today, I was talking with a friend of mine, and we got talking about kind of what's going on. And I said to her, I said, just because I do lean more towards one political party
Mm.
doesn't mean that the other political party isn't, in my opinion, correct and right on certain things. Like,
Or the
I'm not
people or
a
the people involved in it are not evil because they right subscribe to that.
right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just because you vote one way doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything that that party's
Right.
doing and
Right.
disagree with everything the other parties are doing. Like, to me, that doesn't make sense. We should never, with people, with politics, with friends, even with family, we should never 100% agree with everything because, in my
Mm.
opinion, then I don't have an opinion. I'm just a yes, 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 yes person. And no, I have
It's
my
at
own
best
opinion.
boring, right? It's at best boring, and at worst, it's very dangerous. And
Exactly.
you know, you aware of something called Godwin's law,
Yes.
where right? For people who don't know, it means that almost any political discussion, when there's a little heat, will devolve into some discussion of Hitler and the Nazis. Okay, there's some comparison of Hitler and the Nazis, and that happens so often right now. And that's one thing that really incenses me. And
Mm,
I actually send people recommendation. Well, in fact, I was debating this one person where I hesitate to say this, and I'm not saying it in a disparaging way, but he was ignorant of history as far as World War II went and whatnot. And I said, look, I said, you're making some serious accusations. Please don't, unless you've at least read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William Shire, right? Willem Shire. I said, read that. It's a horribly long book. It took me a year to read it, and I'm voracious. I mean, it's actually in volumes, right? I don't know, a few thousand pages. I said, if you want to understand Hitler, if you want to see somebody who's really Hitler, read Mein Kampf. I said, read.
mm,
Now, I don't care, and I won't name names, but you can, because every leader in both our countries has been, tagged with the Nazi or the Hitler label over the last
right.
10, 20 years. At some point, they say,
Mm,
no, these people are not Hitler, okay? They are not doing the things he did. You have no idea. And when you talk about anybody being a Nazi or a fascist, please just know what you're talking about before you use that label, use that tag, and I think you'll find that it doesn't apply to really anybody in the West. Nobody's been, even if their intentions were that, nobody's been able to pull it off successfully, and I doubt that they will.
right.
But here's the thing that scares me. When people say all the conditions, that's happening a lot in the States right now. All the conditions are right. It's the same conditions as when Hitler, motivated his people. I said, no, you know what is the same right now, or we're getting dangerously close to, is the people creating an image of the other,
Right.
dehumanizing their neighbors, dehumanizing the people who are somewhat different than them, right? We are
Mm.
tribal. That's how we're wired. That's
It's
inevitable. We're
human
going to see
nature. Yep.
differences, right? We're going to have prejudices. We're going to gravitate toward the familiar, and we're going to
Mm.
recognize. people who aren't the same as us. What we do with that is very important. And the more we use the language where we're dehumanizing one another, that's what really concerns me. Much more, I
Mm.
think that's much more dangerous than whoever's, sitting in Ottawa or DC at this point, because first of all, they don't have those jobs really out for all that long.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. And they only have the control over our lives that we allow them to. So,
Absolutely. And I think,
that's, yeah.
I've traveled a lot.
Hmm.
And I have another podcast called Global Citizen Life, and it's
Oh,
about
wow. Yeah.
relocating and moving abroad. So I've lived in 5 countries. I've traveled to
Hmm.
over 50. So, I mean, I look at all these other countries, and in some of them, I'm like, why don't we do things like that in Canada? Or why don't they do things that Canada does here?
Yeah.
And I'm always meeting all kinds of people. And generally, people are nice, people are
Hmm.
kind,
Yeah.
people want the same things. They want to spend time with family, they want friendships, they want
Hmm.
a home, they want food. We all kind of want the same basic needs that we all have.
Yeah.
Um, and it's really interesting, even when I talk to them, if I talk about religion or politics with people say, never talk about those. I think those are the best things to talk about, and we should be talking about them.
Right.
But I'm very open-minded. And I'll
Hmm.
ask people, like, why do you believe this? Why do you think that? And when I get the non-open-minded person, it's because it's true, because it's the way it is. And then I think,
Hmm.
okay. But there's other people that can
Yeah.
have conversations and say, because of this, that, or whatever. And I've had amazing conversations with people that we have complete opposite beliefs and thoughts. But I
Hmm.
also know, and probably about a decade or so ago, I realized my thoughts and beliefs are only because I was born in Canada, raised by my parents, went to the school I went with, et
Right.
cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because even if I was born in Canada and taken away from my family and moved halfway around the world, my
Hmm.
thoughts and beliefs would be completely different because of the
Yeah.
situation I was born in. It then makes my thoughts and beliefs, they are not right, they are not wrong, but they are just mine from my experience. And if we can put
Hmm.
ourselves in other people's shoes, our thoughts and beliefs would be different. We would be more understanding. We would get along more. And I wish that there was a way that we could make almost everybody leave their home country, move to a different country where they
Right.
don't speak the language and live there for 3-ish years after high school or something.
Hmm.
People would be a lot more understanding and
Yeah.
be more open and more kind. I mean, it's not hard
Yeah.
to be kind, even with people that I don't
Oh,
really like. I'm always
yeah.
kind and respectful because there's other people around.
Yeah. It's funny because this is fun because we'll get to disagree on this point. I would argue that it
Okay.
is hard to be kind
Mm,
because it requires discipline. And again, because our self-interest and our our need to our fight for survival can often get in the way of that. But having said that, you bring up so many important points. First of all, I'm going to boldly ask you to come onto the Keep It Human podcast to talk about your travels because that's fascinating to me. I've only
love
recently,
to.
last few years, been able to see things other than the United States and Canada. And one of the places I got to speak at was in Cuba, and we could talk for
Oh.
hours about that. I still haven't
Mhm.
put into words my experiences there. It was just amazing. For one thing I will say before I go any further was I came back with an incredible sense of appreciation for what we have in
Mhm.
North America, you know. Um, I complain once in a while. I'm American. It's our birthright, right? So,
We're
but I
we're
catch,
allowed. We're
yeah, I
allowed.
try to catch myself and I say, hey, you know what? First world problems.
Hmm.
But back to, back to this point of what's the binding factor? One conference not too long ago, we got into some pretty deep racial issues. And we are talking about differences and which differences are substantive and which shouldn't be, a concern at all. But again, it's a perspective thing, isn't it? If I can say, for example, the color of our skin shouldn't matter, all other things being equal, as far as the performance of your job or your selection for a position, right? But this black woman said to me, she said, but it does matter to me. And it was cool that she said that, right? I like
Hmm.
it when people, want to debate things a little bit. And because she said, in my experience, the way I grew up, it made a big difference. And it was cool that she was able to expand. Now we can understand that, right?
Right.
People people don't understand this sometimes when I say it, but I say, if I had grown up in the rural areas of Saudi Arabia in the same period of time, I might be flying planes into buildings. You see? And people think
Yeah.
that I'm therefore condoning or tolerating. I said, no, sometimes,
Mm.
and this is to the point that you just said, sometimes we do need to make a stand, right? We have to say, I am right, you're wrong, and there's times when we have to do that and conflict it. But what preserves our humanity is this idea of respect, that I can understand that person more. And if nothing else, to understand my enemy more, big theme in martial arts, right? If I want to
Mhm.
understand myself, I need to know my enemy. If I know my enemy, I understand myself better. I
Right.
can't design and implement a strategy unless I can understand the other person, you see? So I need to
Mhm.
know why these young men are flying planes into our buildings. How else can we approach it? And that doesn't make it right,
No,
doesn't make it right.
understanding
But
does not mean agreeing.
right,
It does
right. But
not mean
having
agreeing
said
at
that,
all. It's just trying to
yeah,
understand and see a different perspective because
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
they were taught, told, informed, they believe it. And they believe that
yeah.
they were right and they did the right thing.
And the
I
most
don't
da and the
agree with
most
it, but
dangerous,
we
right?
have to understand it.
Yeah, the most dangerous part of that whole thing is this: is when people say, "I would never," fill in the blank.
Oh,
Oh yeah? No, you don't know that. There's a
no.
beautiful book that was, well, hard read, a beautiful book. It's called, oh my goodness, I'm not remembering the name. It's around here somewhere. I'll have to send it to you.
Okay.
This psychologist did a beautiful study about, it was called Ordinary Men.
Okay.
And he studied a division of German, basically were German, conscripted German policemen who were then assigned early on one of the tasks of rounding up Jewish people in Poland and then executing them. Okay, firing squads. This was before they were transporting them a whole lot. Then they went into that. But the point was, these were ordinary people and they
Yeah.
were following orders. Sometimes they agreed with the orders, sometimes they didn't. What's interesting is early on, most of them were given the option to refuse the orders and to stay back at the camp. Most didn't because of the social pressures, right? I'm going to be looked at as a
Mm.
coward. I'm going to be looked at as I'm not, right? There's all these forces and factors that it's very difficult. And we're blessed to be able to have this discussion. We're blessed to be able to have this level of awareness. And I think we
Mm.
really need to be appreciative of that. Not everybody has that luxury. Have you seen the guy? Oh, you should have him on your podcast. And I'm not going to remember his name. I'll send it to you. There's a
Okay.
man in the South here. He's a musician, a black man, who became very famous because he got curious about why people get involved with the Ku Klux Klan, right? And the
Okay.
neo-Nazi groups and whatnot. But what he's
Hmm.
very famous for is he deprograms Klansmen. And the wild
Wow.
thing is when he does presentations, he often brings out robes. When they leave the Klan, they give him the robes as a
Wow.
gift and as an honor, right?
Hmm.
And it's fascinating. And when people challenge him and ask, why is a black guy going and talking? Why are you even talking to these people? And it's so beautiful because he said, well, I wanted to understand. He said, they're people too. And what he realized, it's like what you just said. These guys, most by and large, the people that he's worked with, they just grew up in with a very
Yeah.
narrow worldview. They thought everything they were doing was right. They were taught that way. They were brought up that way.
That's
How
what,
could
yeah,
they know otherwise, right?
we're born
Until
a
he
blank
comes
slate.
along.
Basically, as infants,
Mhm.
we're born a blank slate. And what we're taught and told
Yeah,
when we grow up, that's normal. That's right, because
yeah,
we don't have anything else to compare it to. Like that's
yeah,
what we're taught. And that's why we
yeah.
like things and believe things. And if people actually sat back and spent a couple hours on a variety of topics, like, do I really like this kind of music? Why? Do I really
Mhm.
believe in this political party? Do I really hate that one? Do I really think this religion is the be all end all and everything else is completely
Yeah.
wrong? Especially with religion, because there's a lot of overlaps throughout
Right,
all religions. And if people
right.
actually, and I don't know a lot about all religions, but I do know a lot of them have so much overlapping and
Yeah,
entwining that it's like, there are some extreme differences in some of them, but all of them have a lot of the same stuff. And so it's like, how can everything be wrong or everything be right when there's similarities? And And yeah, if people
Yeah.
just actually sat back and thought, do I really believe this? And can I explain it? There was a post, Alex Hermosi posted it, and it was something I had reposted. I'm going to get it a little bit wrong, but it's something I've been saying very similarly over the years is if you can't explain why you believe what you believe, you don't actually believe it.
Hmm.
And I'm like, that it's right.
It's pretty
Like a thing of
powerful.
why do I have
Yeah.
my favorite hockey team, the Calgary Flames? Been my favorite hockey team since I was a kid. Probably because I
Yeah.
grew up close to Calgary, lived in
Hmm.
Calgary. We watched them. They were the closest team. My brothers liked Edmonton, so we had a little home rivalry there because Calgary Edmonton rivalry. But it's just kind of how I grew up. And I've always liked them just because I've always liked them. I liked the red jerseys,
Yeah.
I liked the Flames. And so I can explain, is that a technical reason to really like them?
Yeah.
No, but as a kid, I
Yeah.
did, and those are my reasons. So at least I can explain where some people are like, well, I like so and so because they're the best team. It's like, there is no actual best team. I mean, that can get debated in all
Well, we're gonna
kinds of
have to
ways.
fight. We're gonna have to fight over that because spirit of full disclosure, my dad's second cousins are more recent Henri Richard from the Montreal Canadiens. So, so I have that loyalty, but for no other reason than that. But
But I mean, at least you can say
yeah,
that that's a reason, right? Like sometimes
but you brought up something really critical too. You know, we can debate almost anything, okay, for the
absolutely
reason. But the two things I will never debate with anybody is your beliefs and your feelings because you own those entirely. I can't, here's the other interesting thing. I think too often people engage in debate because they want to persuade or win an argument, right?
right.
And sometimes people misinterpret our passion for that. If I'm debating with you, even passionately, I'm usually not trying to persuade or convince you. I'm just enthusiastic about sharing my point of view. And
Mhm.
I'll be equally as enthusiastic about listening to yours, unless it, really rubs against my core values, which it very seldom does. Like you said, a lot of times
Right,
we're all looking for the same things. We're just coming at it from different angles. So
right.
that's very difficult. And it's one of the jobs of a leader to mediate those differences, right? Especially
Absolutely.
even in the smallest organizations, you're usually today, well, unique to North America, and Europe probably, we're working with very diverse groups of people, you know,
Yes.
in thought and background and beliefs and whatnot. So, I don't know, I go to the mat with this. I don't believe diversity makes us stronger. I really don't. I believe diversity makes us interesting. I believe
Hmm.
our ability to work together despite our differences can make us stronger if we
Right.
embrace that, right? But that requires what you're talking about now to be able to, yeah, and you like you said, what what's the first knee-jerk reaction some people, some organizations or leaders have when they see conflict? They say, well, we're not going to talk about sex. We're not going to talk about religion. We're not going to talk about politics. Great. You just took out the three most interesting, dynamic, and passionate things that human beings want to talk about.
Right.
Deep are your
And
relationship's going to be without talking about these three things, right? Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah.
And I think they're important conversations to have, but I just think people
Mhm.
are need to be open about it. And I love that you said
Yeah.
too, because it's not about changing someone's mind. I don't want to change someone's
Mhm.
mind. It's about my understanding why somebody believes or thinks what
Mhm.
they do.
Mhm.
Pardon the interruption. If you're liking the show so far, please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. It really means a lot to me. It helps grow the show and the channel and to the show.
Mhm.
Um, and 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 sometimes like I've had some great conversations where it's like I remember saying to a guy, you know what? I understand why you believe what you believe. And it was and I honestly I don't even remember what the topic was, but it was such a
Mhm.
great conversation. We were like he a little heated back and forth, passionate is more than I would say than
Yep.
heated.
Yep.
And I said, we just need to agree to disagree. I'm not trying to change your mind. You're not
Yeah.
going to change mine, but I understand because of your experiences that this is what you think. Because if I had those experiences, I would absolutely agree and believe exactly what you believe. But because my experiences were different, I'm going to stick with mine because that was
Mhm.
my experience, but I can understand yours.
And then isn't
And
it
it was
cool
great.
we can find the intersections, right? Because like what you just said, I'm wasting my breath, but particularly in politics, if we can focus on what we agree we can work on together and put the
Right.
other things aside instead of,
Yes.
and too often, but it happens in businesses too. Too often we get locked in mortal combat over issues that really won't be resolved. And I'm not saying
Right.
sometimes they're not important to one side or the other, or maybe to both, but
Mhm.
they're not going to be resolved. I mean, again, classically in North America, we're locked in this combat about the abortion issue,
That was what I was had in my head too,
right?
thinking that one will never be resolved.
I don't think in our lifetime anyway. There's no scientific consensus of where life begins and how it's constituted and blah, blah, blah. So, when people throw that up, it's difficult. There's a lot
Right.
of religious sentiment involved in it. There's a lot of ethics involved in it. So, will we ever resolve it? Like I said, not in my lifetime. You're younger than me.
No.
Maybe you'll live to see it.
You
It's,
know, I don't know. I don't think because people are very passionate and very strong
yeah,
with their beliefs and they
yeah.
can justify their beliefs
Hmm.
to themselves and to
Hmm.
those who have the same beliefs. And then
Yeah.
for the people that are the opposite, they can justify it too. And so I
It's
don't think there's
right.
ever going to be something to resolve for that. There's never going to be a
Yeah.
consensus on it. And
No.
that's one of those things that we're just going to have to
And that's just
agree to
one.
disagree.
Yeah,
And
that's
you're right,
just
that's just
one.
one thing.
There's lots of them. And the thing is that the toughest questions are not right versus wrong. They're right
No,
versus right. So I believe that, you know, again, as leaders, we need to be able to discriminate these issues and say, this one we shouldn't be spending time on,
right,
or it's to be argued in a different arena than this particular arena, right?
right.
We're not gonna, but here's the thing, we're back to the politicians being such great marketers, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
this person I met wrote this beautiful book called The Wedge, and that's what he studied. He studied the political wedge issues, political issues, and how most of the issues we see as wedge issues are not resolvable,
Right.
but they're highly marketable, right?
Yes.
And so you get the
And
butts
they
out
can
of the
keep
seats
people
when you,
angry at each other.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I always I was as I was talking to my friend earlier too, we were talking about politics. I said, whenever there's
Mhm,
something big going on, like whenever
mhm.
there's this new big thing, I often wonder, what are all the politicians doing behind the scenes? Why are they distracting us with
Uh,
this thing to be doing something else? And that's my personal belief, and people can
yeah.
agree or disagree, and that's
No,
okay.
no, you're
But
right. You're right on. You're
I
right on. A
always
few,
think like
right?
what are they doing? They've got us focused on A.
Yeah.
What are they what's this other thing that they're trying to do?
It's changed, and it's changed. That's changed a lot now. It's interesting because, when I was a younger person, and I got more involved directly in politics a few years ago, and I got a little peek behind the curtain. And ironically, I got a peek behind the curtain of both major parties here in the States. And
Mhm.
that formulated a dedication in me never to be involved with either major party here in the state. And I'm not denigrating anybody, but I'm saying, first of all, it's become a huge industry. It's our biggest industry.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I get people wanting to protect their jobs and protecting their revenue stream. I get it. It's not all that permissive.
Understandable.
We're talking
We would
about
all do
public
it.
money.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's, all our founders, Canada the same way, when the Confederation was being founded, you'll hear the same thing. All the founders worried very much about that. And that's why they
Right.
wanted limited government, right? They didn't want the government involved. But now I'm going off on a tangent. The important thing
Mhm.
is this. When we, when you get behind closed doors, 20, 30 years ago even, a lot of the people we see as adversarial would still sit down and have dinner together and get to
Right.
know each other. And then
Yep.
they would decide, we're going to work on this, we're not going to work on that. Now there's very distinct lines drawn, and part of it is the fundraising issue. I've heard, they're back and forth, and they spend so
Mhm.
much time on it, they don't have the time. But what's ironic, what I really love about Canada and the parliamentary system is, for most major issues, they make sure everybody's in the room, and they're yelling and screaming at each other, but they're in the
They're in
room.
the room. At least they're in the room.
Watch C-SPAN. There's no debate. Very rarely. When they're giving their statements, there's one person in the room, and then the next person comes in, and all they're doing is giving their statements. They're not debating, you see. So that's an interesting thing. And again, not to get waxing too far off in politics, but we see the same thing in business. Leaders have to be very cognizant that
Mhm.
that their organization is not becoming siloed, right? That people aren't
Right.
dividing up into camps or just aren't interacting. I did a session couple of years ago down, I think it was in Georgia, and their concern was their sales team and their tech team were not communicating at all. And it was creating a lot of communication problems with the customers. And this was a
Hmm.
pretty high tech kind of thing. They were in the recycling business and it was heavy duty stuff. And that was the whole issue. Once we got them in the same room and we created, a platform for them to be able to talk with one another and visit with one another, then most of those issues went away, you see.
Right.
And it wasn't an intentional thing, just people got divided up. These people were
Hmm.
busy over here, these people were busy over there. But again, if we
And the
accept,
understanding of what each was doing. Sales understood the
yeah,
process of sales and they could talk about it, techniques, complaints, whatever. Same with
yeah,
tech. They
yeah,
understand that, and a lot probably don't really understand how each other's work and do their jobs. But when they
hmm,
start to communicate and can understand, it makes things better. It's
yeah.
communication and understanding.
Believe it or not, we do a lot of work in healthcare, and for a long time, it's getting much better now, but for a long time, there was a division between doctors and nurses. They weren't really communicating effectively, even though they were in the same space a lot of the time, right? There was, there's a distinction between the two. And I think the best leaders in healthcare now are breaking that down. They're
Mhm.
looking at it more as, hey, we're just all part of the same team. We just have different roles. And that communication needs to be practiced diligently. It needs to become a discipline, right? Oh, it gets
Absolutely.
crazy. I mean, it's wild. It's wild. Man, you're fun to talk to. I got to tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, we could talk for hours, but I think we both have other
Yeah,
meetings coming up. So before we
yeah,
wrap up, though, if people wanted to find your books, you've got three
yeah,
books out right now. If they wanted to get some more information about you, work with you,
yeah.
where can they find you and your stuff?
I don't brag often, but I'm actually working on number 11 now. Some of them are derivatives of the others, but
Okay.
yeah, Inspire Empower Guide is the latest release. I'm now working on a book that's titled Keep It Human, which is our theme now. The Sensei Leader is another one that we're still promoting pretty actively, and all those can be found. You can find them anywhere you buy books, but thehumancentricleader.org is a good place to come to if you're interested in having me come and speak or work with your organization. And the dream came true a few months ago. It's only in its first stages right now. We're kind of inviting people by hand, but after an event, especially if I was doing a keynote, we're only talking for an hour and a half, and it's hard. You get the conversation started, but then where do we go from here? So I wanted to
Right.
have a network where leaders can share ideas and support one another. So we started something called the Keep It Human Network, and you get to that by keepithuman.network. And
Okay.
there's a free forever option there, and then as we get into more content, we're going to have some other levels for people who want to go deeper. But yeah, please come on there and share because and I'll leave you this thought because whenever I'm pressed to summarize all this stuff in one thought, it's this: leadership is sharing. A leader shares. The rest of the conversation is just about what we're willing to share and how we're going to do it. So yeah, that's it. And there's so many people running around with cool ideas, and I watch that, curate it, and steal your ideas because that's how we're able to get it around, and share it with other people. So yeah,
Absolutely.
but seriously, from the heart, this is really fun. I want to have you on the Keep It Human podcast, and we can talk
Love
about
to
your
be there.
adventures. And yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And I'll make sure too, the links for everything are in the show notes for everybody to make it easy to connect with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time today.